My name is Paul. I'm 71 years old and I've seen a lot in this life, but there is a night that still wakes me up from time to time. Time has passed, but he has memories that he does not age. Now tell me, have you ever been rejected by your own family, even after you have given everything for them? Have you ever felt shame for something that wasn't your fault, just because your body no longer cooperated with you? I know I'm not the only one who carries this kind of chest pain. Many people live in silence with a lump in their throat, not understanding how that blood tie turned into distance, a joke or repulsion. Sometimes what hurts the most is not what they say. That's what they fail to say. The averted gaze, the chair that is left, the silence after the laughter. Today I'm going to tell you what happened at that Christmas dinner, when my belly didn't stop growing and no one wanted to understand why. When I swallowed more than food, I swallowed contempt, I swallowed loneliness, but something unexpected happened at that table, and after that night, nothing was the same as before, not even for me, not even for them. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. What happened at that supper wasn't just embarrassment. It was one of those moments when the body decides to scream everything that the heart has been silent for too long. I endured laughter, jokes, crooked looks. I was treated like dead weight in my own family, but no one expected that. In the middle of dinner, my body would give in, and in front of everyone something leaked from me. Something that wasn't just physical. It was the truth that no one wanted to see. When that liquid ran down my shirt, the table turned into chaos, and who mocked? He was speechless. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own home, if you've ever felt that even speaking no one listened to you, then maybe you understand why this story still hurts. And that's why, before continuing, I wanted to ask, if this story has already touched something inside, support me with a like or subscribe here. It is not by number, nor by vanity. It's just because telling it out loud isn't easy, and knowing that someone is really listening makes that pain way less. Thank you for being here. Let's continue. I arrived at my daughter's house with a simple panettone under my arm and a gift wrapped in gold paper left over from last year. The wind cut my face, and I still felt the cold outside, but the house was warm, lit, decorated like a postcard. Lights hanging from the windows, the smell of cinnamon and cloves in the air, a large garland on the door with a red bow that I myself helped buy years ago when Mary was still alive. Amanda opened the door with a hurried smile. It was a quick, cold protocol hug. "Hi, Dad. I'm glad you came," he said, but without looking into my eyes for too long. Inside, the sound of the piano playing Silent Night filled my ears, but my heart was empty. Tyler, my son, was on the couch with his cell phone in his hand. He just looked up, nodded, and went back to what he was seeing. I took off my coat slowly, trying not to show that the simple task of raising my arms already made me sweat. The belly, huge and heavy, unbalanced me even in small things. The grandchildren came running, excited, but stopped in the middle of the way when they saw me in its entirety. One of them pointed, whispered something in the other's ear, and the two ran back to their mother. I entered calmly, observing everything. The table was almost ready, the fireplace lit, the glasses lined up, the smell of roast turkey mingling with the aroma of natural pine in the corner of the room. I wanted to feel part of it. I really wanted to, but every averted glance, every prolonged silence reminded me that I was a stranger within my own family. I went to the dining room and placed the panettone on the sideboard. No one thanked him. Amanda passed me like someone who goes around a piece of furniture on the way. Tyler's sister-in-law, who was sitting next to a vacant chair, stood up discreetly and switched seats. I saw everything. I kept everything, as I always did. I sat slowly, with my back resting on the back of the chair, trying not to touch my belly too much on the table. The shirt, wide and dark, still showed the disproportionate volume. It was impossible to disguise, and even so, I pretended I didn't see the looks. Pretending was what I had left. Tyler walked over and asked, "Dad, have you been eating well?" The phrase seemed to worry, but the tone, it was a judgment era. I said yes, with a nod. He didn't even wait for another word, turned and left. Sitting there, I heard a cousin comment in a low voice to his wife, "Doesn't he realize the size of this? It's going to explode at dessert time." And they both laughed, trying to hide it. But I listened. I listened to everything. There are things that hurt more than slaps, and it's the kind of pain that no one sees, only those who feel it. At that moment, I found myself thinking, how many people are watching this right now and understanding exactly what I felt at that time? How many have arrived in a place thinking they would be welcome and found that they were left over? If you've ever experienced something like this, comment below, "I've lived it." That's it. 3 words, but they carry a world inside. The conversation flowed freely between them. They laughed out loud, talked about travel, work, expensive gifts. I tried to get into the subject. Once I tried to tell her about a book she had read. "Oh, cool, Dad," Amanda cut off and changed the subject. Another time, I commented on a neighbor of ours who had died that month. "This mood up, huh?" joked the cousin, and the laughter returned. Every minute in there, I cringed inside, as if my presence weighed me down, bothered me. And the saddest thing is that, for a second, I started to believe that maybe it was better if I wasn't there. The belly was heavy, the chest weighed more. I kept looking around, trying to hold on to something good. Mary's portrait was still on the shelf, among snowmen and golden reindeer. That gave me strength. I closed my eyes for a moment and wondered what she would say if she saw me in that situation. "Stand firm, Paul. You've always been the strongest," I could almost hear. But not every force holds back a tear, and I already felt one wanting to escape. The night was just beginning, and I could hardly imagine that the worst was yet to come, because in that house, at that supper, it wasn't just my body that was about to explode. It was also the silence of years, the hurt kept, the truth hidden behind every polite smile. And when all this came to light, no one there could pretend anymore. Do you know what happened next? I'll tell you right away, but I warn you, what's next? No one at that table expected it. The table was beautiful as usual. Amanda has always had this talent for arranging everything with care. Napkins folded like Christmas trees, candles low in the center, and cutlery shining. But even with so much beauty on the outside, what hurt was the emptiness on the inside. As everyone began to sit down, I noticed that each seat had a name on a little card, except mine. I stood for a few seconds trying to understand if it was just an oversight or a subtle message. I ended up choosing the chair at the end, farthest from the fireplace, where no one wanted to sit. Amanda came with the dishes and handed them one by one, smiling, caressing her shoulders, asking if everything was okay. When he got to me, he just pushed the plate over the edge of the table without saying anything, without looking at me. The dish of rice with raisins was passed from hand to hand, but stopped on the other side. I waited, thinking someone would notice that the rice didn't reach me, but no, they continued talking as if I wasn't there. I decided to get up. It was just a plate of rice, but it felt like I was going to climb a mountain. I rested my hands on the table, felt my belly touch the edge, stretching my shirt to a point that there was no longer any way to disguise. The wood creaked, and for a moment the noise of the room ceased. Everyone looked. One of the grandchildren, with the cruel innocence of children, pointed and let out loudly, "Grandpa, do you have a baby in your belly?" The laughter came muffled, mixed with embarrassed expressions. Amanda tried to disguise her discomfort, but responded with a tone that cut me inside. "It's because Grandpa's been eating too much, honey." I lowered my head. I sat down again. I helped myself with what I achieved. I pushed the food on the plate as if pushing dignity into itself. I chewed in silence. The noise of the conversations returned, but not for me. It was as if my presence was a noise in the harmony of that family. I listened to everything, but I didn't hear anything that was for me. The subjects went over my head. Travel plans, who won promotion, children's school, Black Friday, and I was there with my belly hurting and my chest even more so. I found myself staring at the glass, trying to see the reflection of who I had become. Because that man sitting there, it didn't look like me anymore. You know, there comes a point in life when we realize that the strongest pain is not always physical. Sometimes it's silence, the way people treat us as if we are taking up too much space, talking too much, being too much. And tonight I was all of that, too. A weight, a nuisance, a body growing, deforming, drawing attention for the wrong reasons. And no one wanted to ask if it hurt. They just laughed. They just diverted. They just followed the supper, as if I were the crooked ornament of the tree that no one has the courage to take away, but doesn't look at either. The plate emptied slowly. I swallowed more feeling than food. Each bite came with a bitter taste of memory. I remembered when Amanda was little and asked to sit on my lap at supper time. I remembered the times I made a point of buying gifts, even when money was tight. I remembered the Christmas when I sold my old watch to buy a used bike for Tyler. And now I was just another strange object in that decorated room. My body weighed on the chair, my thoughts weighed even heavier, and even with soft music playing in the background, I could only hear one buzz, the sound of solitude dressed as a party. The hardest thing about all of this is that no one there seemed to notice. Or maybe they preferred not to notice, because it is easier to laugh at an old man's belly than to face the disease. It's more comfortable to make a joke than to ask if everything is okay. It is simpler to ignore than to welcome. But what none of them knew is that, inside, I was accumulating not only liquid, but also a truth that was about to leak. Because humiliation has a limit. And it was right there, on the verge of exploding. And if you thought the night would end with silence and forkfuls, get ready. What happened next? No one at that table will ever forget it. Would you be able to recognize the exact moment when a soul says, enough? Because mine was about to happen. After all that, I just wanted to finish my plate in peace. But even that was not given to me. While pretending to pay attention to a conversation about a cruise that Amanda's brother-in-law's family was going to take in the Caribbean, I clearly heard the voice of my son, Tyler, whispering to his brother-in-law, "He's weird. I should have stayed at home." The phrase entered my ear like a nail being hammered slowly. Strange? After everything I've done? After years of working like a workhorse for them to study, travel, live comfortably? I was called a stranger, as if I were a misfit presence in the midst of creation itself. I didn't react. I just took a deep breath and took another sip of the wine, even with my throat dry with hurt. Soon after, a cousin I hadn't seen in years said loudly, "If his belly grows bigger, we'll have to serve him in another room." The laughter that followed almost knocked over a glass, and no one scolded him. Nobody said, "Hey, respect." Neither did Amanda. Neither did Tyler, much less Jennifer, the daughter-in-law, who added, "Since he arrived, the guest room has had a strange smell. I had to leave the window open at night, as if I were a moldy object, and not her husband's father." I looked at Amanda. She was pouring more wine to her mother-in-law, as if she hadn't heard anything, but he listened. Everyone listened. I felt like a stain on the white towel. Something everyone saw but pretended not to notice, hoping it would disappear on its own. And to think that I was the one who helped pay for that house. When they moved, I sold my car to cover the value of the deposit. Amanda promised me that that house would always have a room for me. And now that room had a weird smell. I finished eating slowly, with my stomach getting tighter and tighter, not only from the disease, but from the pain. You know when you feel like you're in a place, but you're not really there? That was it. My body occupied the chair, but my soul was already outside, waiting for time to pass. Then came the photos. There's always that moment when everyone gathers by the fireplace to take a souvenir. I went there, a little awkwardly. As I approached, Amanda said, smiling forcefully, "Dad, can you stand further back, just so as not to cover the children?" I positioned myself, as she asked, in the corner, almost out of frame, like an extra. The camera went off, the flash flashed, the laughter returned. But there, in that click, something inside me broke for good, because I understood. It wasn't just the belly, it wasn't just the disease. It was me. I was the one who no longer fit in that frame. That happy family picture had room for everyone, except for the old man who helped build each brick. But they forgot one thing. A man can endure much humiliation. You can lower your head for a while, you can shut up, but one time, the pain overflows. And in my case, she was about to do it literally. Because that night, what they called exaggeration, what they laughed at and joked, it was going to become the center of a scandal that no one in that house would ever forget. And me, I was just going to watch. Have you ever felt your body warn you that something is about to happen, but no one around you pays attention? Well, that's exactly what happened right after that photo. And what came next? It wasn't pretty at all. I sat there in the corner of the table, watching the plates being piled up, the cutlery being dragged, the laughter that continued as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything was different. I looked at each one of them, and it was as if I were watching a movie that I was once part of, but that now went without my name in the credits. The light of the fireplace reflected in the glasses, and for an instant, my memory took me to another time, a time when Christmas was different, in which Mary was still with me. I remember it as if it were today. She was the one who decorated the house with those little lights that flashed slowly, made gingerbread cookies with the children, wrote cards by hand for each distant relative. I was responsible for the smoked ham, bought it in advance, and prepared it in the oven with cloves and honey. It was tradition. We did everything together, even putting the presents under the tree after the children slept. Laughter at that time was sincere, and the supper was made of food and love. I also remembered the first Christmas after Tyler entered college in Buffalo. He didn't have money for a ticket, and I sold my old watch, the only gift my father left me, to buy a round-trip ticket. He came home crying, saying he would never forget it, but he forgot. I remembered the mortgage I took out in my own name so that Amanda could finance the house where I was now a welcome guest. I signed papers without reading properly, just to see my daughter happy. And now, not even the name on the place at the table she remembered putting. How many times have Mary and I stopped buying things for ourselves to ensure a hearty supper for our children? How many sleepless nights? How many installment bills? How many "we'll find a way" did she whisper to me as she cut off market coupons? And today, sitting at that table made me feel a burden, as if I were an intruder, a foreign body. I swallowed hard. The food no longer went down properly. The taste of the past was stronger than any spice of the present. And then, out of nowhere, a phrase crossed my mind like a blade. I was the foundation, and now I'm the nuisance. It's difficult when we realize that we have become a remnant in the history we helped to build. No, I'm here opening my heart, telling this story without hiding anything, without flourishing, because I know there are people on the other side who will identify with it. And if you've come this far with me, if this story is touching you in any way, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing those memories, which sometimes hurt, but also heal. And I still have a lot to tell you. I came back from the memory when I heard a louder laugh coming from the room. It was Amanda's cousin telling an old college story, one I'd heard before. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked if I wanted a coffee, water, nothing. I was just the quiet man, sitting with difficulty, trying to hide the belly that already hurt just by existing. I looked again at Mary's portrait on the shelf. She looked so beautiful that Christmas in 1998, in a red dress, with a pearl necklace that she inherited from her mother. That night was one of the last in which everyone really smiled together. She would have been sad about what we have become. He would have called Amanda in the corner, taught Tyler a lesson, told me to get up from the table and not accept crumbs of affection. But Mary was gone, and with her, gone was the glue that still held this family together. I stopped to think, how do you get to this point? At what point does love become an obligation? Does caution become a favor? Does presence become a burden? Do they really not realize what they are doing? Or do they understand, but you think I don't understand? The night was not over yet. There was dessert, there was an exchange of gifts, and there was still something inside me that I couldn't explain. A pressure, a discomfort, a pain that was no longer just emotional. Something was about to happen. Something that was going to change everything, even if no one there was prepared. Because when the soul is silent for a long time, the body screams. And at that supper, my body decided not to wait any longer. Do you want to know what happened next? So hold on tight, because the truth they avoided seeing, it was going to run right before my eyes. The pain started as a mild discomfort, almost like a cramp that I already knew. But that night, it grew slowly, gaining space inside me, just like the silence that surrounded me in that room. With each laugh in the background, with each cutlery hitting the plate, I felt the pressure increase. I started sweating, and it wasn't just the heat of the fireplace. It was a cold sweat running down the back of the neck, down the back, sticking the shirt to the body. I took a deep breath, trying to disguise it, but the breath was already short, heavy. The belly seemed to throb. I felt like an overinflated balloon about to burst. I stood up slowly, trying not to make a fuss. I wanted to go to the bathroom. Is that it? To step away for a few minutes and understand what was going on inside me, but even that didn't give me dignity. Jennifer, sitting by the door, looked me sideways and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Be careful not to fall, huh?" The phrase came with venom, wrapped in a false tone of concern. Tyler, without looking up from his phone, added, "Dad, maybe it's better to make an appointment with the doctor. It's getting ugly." He was not careful. It was masked contempt. It was as if my illness was my fault, as if my presence there was a selfish choice, an affront to the perfection of their night. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I leaned against the sink for a few seconds before looking in the mirror. The image scared me, my face pale, eyes sunken, my forehead glistening with sweat. I lifted my shirt slowly. The belly seemed even bigger. The skin was stretched, shiny, with purplish spots near the sides. I touched it with my fingertips and felt the heat, a strange heat, as if something inside me was boiling, the heart racing, the light head. I had to hold onto the edge of the sink so I wouldn't fall. Am I dying? I thought. That was not normal. I knew it. The doctors had been investigating, talking about fluid accumulation, in tests that never came clearly. But there, looking at myself, I understood that my body was warning me, and warning loudly. I washed my face with cold water, trying to regain some control. I stayed there for a few more minutes, breathing slowly, as if I was waiting for permission to return, as if he was afraid of what would come next. When I left, no one asked if I was okay. No one noticed the time I spent inside, or they pretended not to notice. I went back to my seat and sat down, trembling. The dish had already been exchanged for dessert. Amanda served pumpkin pie with whipped cream, smiling at her aunt as if nothing had happened. They offered me a piece, but not with words. They just pushed the plate towards me. I denied it with my hand, without the strength to do so. The pressure in the belly increased by the minute. It was as if something inside was about to break, and no one there cared. The party went on, and I just tried to keep myself whole. But the question that surrounded my head was only one. How long would my body be able to hold on to what my soul could no longer bear? Because what was about to happen was not just physical. It was a silent cry that had been building up for years. And when he escaped, no one else could pretend not to see it. After I returned from the bathroom, with my face wet and my heart out of balance, I sat in silence and watched the details of the table. The candles were already half full. The pie in the center was praised as if it were the best in the world, and the children ran around the table without being restrained. I tried to stay there, present, as if my presence still meant something. The silence inside me made more noise than their conversation, until Amanda stood up. He took the glass with both hands, made that smile of someone who rehearsed the scene, and said, in a voice choked with superficial emotion, "I wanted to make a toast. Here's to close-knit family, health, and new beginnings." Everyone raised their glasses. Everyone toasted. except me. My name was not said, my presence was not mentioned. I was erased with class, forgotten with glasses raised. I raised mine, slowly, trying not to let it appear that my hand was shaking. The glass slipped a little, hit the plate lightly, making a noise that drew attention. Amanda's cousin laughed and blurted out loudly, "Too much wine, right, Paul?" That came as another cut, another slap without a hand. His daughter-in-law, Jennifer, thinking that no one would hear, whispered, "At least this year he didn't sleep on the table." I closed my eyes for a moment, and at that moment I really wished I hadn't come. I thought about my house, my rocking chair, the music I could be listening to, the peace I could be feeling. But she was there, her belly throbbing and her chest even more inflamed. And even so, I didn't explode. I swallowed everything, as I always did. No. There are times when we realize that abandonment doesn't come only when we are left behind. It also comes when they erase us from the inside out, even sitting next to us. And that's where the pain lives, in the space between what we once were and what they have made us. You who are there listening to me, stay with me until the end, because what happened after this toast was the fuse. It was the moment when everything that hurt me inside began to drip outside, and no one else could pretend they couldn't see. The party continued. Amanda struck up a conversation with an aunt. Tyler took a selfie with his children. His brother-in-law talked about a new investment. And I, sitting in the same chair, began to feel a different weight. A pressure that was not only emotional, it was physical, real, as if something inside me was looking for a way out. My hands trembled, my feet no longer touched the ground firmly. The smell of pumpkin pie, which I had missed before, now wrapped my stomach. And then something began to move inside me in a way I had never felt before, something that would not expect to be hidden. And when this came to light, no one at that table could escape. Can you imagine what happens when the truth, repressed for so long, decides to drip before everyone? So just wait and see, because what came next? He stopped dinner. After dessert, as was customary in that house, Amanda started calling everyone to take the picture in front of the fireplace. It was a tradition that began when Mary was still alive. She was the one who organized everything, fixed the grandchildren, straightened their hair, told everyone to smile with their hearts. I remembered it so clearly that for a second I thought I would hear her voice saying my name. But no, this time it was Amanda who commanded in a hurry and authority, as if she were an event producer. "Come on, guys, quickly, the food has cooled down. Let's take this photo to post soon." Everyone began to gather. The children sat on the mat. The adults stayed behind, some with glasses still in hand. I got up slowly, my stomach aching, but still hoping to be part of that portrait, even if it was just to leave a souvenir for my grandchildren. As I approached the group, Tyler looked me aside and said, in a low but firm enough voice, "Dad, can you stand aside more, just to facilitate framing?" That was enough. I understood. They wanted to hide me. I didn't fit into that image anymore. It was as if my presence spoiled the balance of the scene. As if my body, deformed and sick, polluted the portrait of the perfect family. I went to the left corner, half bent over. I stayed there on the side. Nobody came to pull me to the center. Nobody said, "Come, Father, you're part of it." Nothing. At the time of the click I stood still, with my face half erased by the shadow of the curtain. The light burst in the background, and I was like a figure, an erased outline at the edge of the photograph. And there, at that moment when the flash illuminated everyone but me, I decided I wasn't going to try to fit in anymore, not after that. I went back to the chair without saying a word. His hand was still shaking, her belly throbbed. But what hurt the most was the certainty that for them I was just an uncomfortable detail, something that could not be cut, but that had to be hidden. And you know what revolted me the most? It was not the request to stay aside. It was the fact that no one realized that it destroyed me. No one looked me in the eye. No one realized that, in that second, I gave up. The truth is, sometimes the worst loneliness isn't being alone. It's being surrounded by people, and yet be ignored. I know there are people out there listening to me now who have felt this. That feeling of being tolerated but not wanted, to be present but invisible. If you know what that is, comment here. I understand you. And because only those who have lived this kind of emptiness know how much it weighs. I sat back at the table, looked at the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree, and thought about how life changes. One day, you are the center, the one who carries the sustenance on his shoulders, the one who drives in the snow to get a gift, the one who goes into debt to keep the house alive. The next, you are just the shape of the photo, the detail that no one wants to appear. But at that moment, something inside me began to change, not in anger, not in revenge, but in decision. I was going to stop insisting. I was going to stop trying to fit where there was no more room for me. I was going to let them keep the picture, because what was about to happen, it could not be erased with a filter, nor cut out with a smile. What was about to happen, it would be marked forever, and no one there was prepared. Have you ever seen a truth appear without asking permission? Well then, safe, because it came with everything. That time came right after the last bite of dessert. The pie was still half on my plate when I felt a violent sting in my belly. But this time it wasn't like before. It was not a light discomfort nor a bearable pressure. It was pain, a deep, throbbing pain, as if someone was squeezing my insides, as if my skin were a balloon about to burst. I let out an involuntary moan, low, but enough to cut through the buzz of the conversation around. The laughter ceased. The background music continued to play, but now it seemed distant. I tried to hold on, but my fingers trembled. The cup slipped out of my hand. It fell to the ground with a dry, shattered sound. The wine ran down the floor like blood. That's when everyone looked at me. Amanda suddenly stood up, took a step towards me, but stopped halfway, as if she didn't know what to do. I saw her hesitate. I saw the fear on her face, and I also saw the shame. Jennifer covered her nose with a napkin. He said softly, but loud enough for me to hear, "Yuck, my God." Tyler, standing behind the chair, took 2 steps back, as if seeing something dangerous. Jennifer's cousin walked away from the table. Amanda's brother-in-law muttered an expletive. The children were rushed out of the room. It was then that it happened. I felt an internal crack, as if the skin had given way. A warmth ran down the side of my belly. The shirt, previously dark, now began to be stained by a thick, dark liquid, which descended slowly, marking my body, my pants, my chair. What doctors called ascites, the fluid accumulated in the abdomen, had finally found an outlet. The silence turned to chaos. "My God!" shouted Amanda. One of the cousins covered his mouth. The aunt pulled the tablecloth and tried to leave from the side. The smell began to spread, moist, dense, almost organic. A smell that did not match the decorated pine tree, nor the canapes of the supper, but it was real, raw, unquestionable. I stayed there, seated, in pain, in shock, but for the first time that night, I was not invisible. Everyone looked at me. And it was no longer with neglect, nor with jokes. It was with dread. It was guilty. Their embarrassment filled the room like smoke. They tried not to look, but they couldn't turn away. Because there, in that chair, was the truth. And the truth trickled down before everyone, wetting the floor and dyeing the supper that they tried so hard to make perfect. I wasn't the drunken old man, nor the inconvenient father, nor the grandfather who ate too much. I was a sick man, a man who had swallowed pain, silence, rejection, until the body decided not to take it anymore. Amanda took another step closer, but stopped when she saw the soaked chair. She trembled. I didn't know if I cleaned, if I screamed, if I hugged myself. Deep down, she knew that this moment couldn't be fixed with a tea towel or an excuse. Jennifer left the room. Tyler stood there, looking at me as if he saw a stranger. And I looked back. I looked at each one of them, without saying anything. I didn't need to. My body spoke for me. It's strange to say this, but at that moment, I felt a kind of peace. It hurts to admit it, but to see their reaction, To see panic replace indifference was like a relief, because the truth has weight. And I carried mine alone for a long time, and now she was there, in front of everyone. There was no way to pretend anymore. There was no way to hide in the background of the photo anymore. No, there are times when the body does what the heart can no longer do. He screams, he opens up, he exposes, and when that happens, there is no turning back. The silence I had been carrying for years was broken there, in front of the fireplace. And that family, which erased me in so many ways, now had to deal with what was left. But what happened after that? Did they help me? Did they clean me? Did they apologize to me? Or did they do worse? If you think that was the end of the humiliation, it's because you haven't seen what happened when I tried to get up, because the worst was yet to come. The liquid continued to flow. My shirt was already completely soaked, and the chair creaked under my wet, stained, hot body. The ground around me looked like a drawing, made with shame and contempt, a dark, dense trail that I could no longer ignore. Absolute silence took over the room for about 5 seconds, those pauses that seem eternal. The cutlery stopped in the air, the mouths were half open, and the eyes of everyone there seemed to shout the same thing. "What is this?" Jennifer was the first to break the silence. He shouted, "This is dangerous. It can contaminate everything." He pulled his children by the arm, as if I were a loose animal, as if the old man at the table had become a public health risk. Tyler, in that harsh voice he inherited from his mother, asked me from afar, his brows furrowed, "Dad, what is this? Why didn't you warn before?" As if I had chosen to go through that. As if shame was my fault. Amanda tried to control the situation. He ran to the kitchen asking for towels, cloths, something to clean. But no one wanted to help, no one approached. It was as if my body had become a biological bomb, as if the liquid that came out of me was more toxic than all the years that I swallowed the sorrow of those people. The cousins left the room as if the floor was on fire. One of the children began to cry. The little one, the one who always called me Grandpa Paulie, now hid her face in her mother's lap. And me, I stayed there, seated, curved, sweating cold, with his eyes downcast, with his soul torn and his body defeated. But for the first time, I no longer felt ashamed, because now it was all there, the belly they mocked, the swelling they judged, the disease they laughed at. The truth flowed with the force of everything I had silenced for years. And they didn't know what to do with it. Amanda came back with a towel in her hands, but stopped 2 steps away from me. He looked at the floor, at my shirt, at his pale face, and couldn't take another step. "Dad, she tried to say, but her voice failed. I slowly looked up and stared at each one. No one held their gaze. Jennifer still had her back turned. Tyler looked at his phone, as if he wanted to escape from there through another screen. The cousins pretended to help in the kitchen, but no one, absolutely no one, reached out to me. No. There are things in life that we only understand when we break down, and at that supper it was my body that broke first. But what really collapsed was the pretend castle they were trying to prop up. The perfect house, the fireplace photo, the empty toasts, all that collapsed when the pain became visible, when the disease stopped being a rumor and turned into liquid on the floor. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. There are many people who carry pain in silence, and sometimes all they need is to know that they are not alone. I stood there, breathing hard. The towel in Amanda's hands was still clean, intact. Her shame was so great that she couldn't even offer that. I didn't say anything. I didn't complain. I didn't cry. But inside me, one thing was clear. What leaked that night was not only the liquid from my belly, it was the truth. It was humiliation. It was everything they pretended not to see. And now, I couldn't hide it anymore. But perhaps what hurt the most, that's what came soon after, because sometimes after the shame comes the deepest cut. Do you want to know what my daughter did when I tried to get up? Just wait, because what she said at that moment, everything changed. I tried to get up. Slowly, The hand slipping on the edge of the damp table, the fingers shaking, the whole body screaming for help. The towel, once white, now stained by a dark shade that no one dared to face. The silence was so thick that I could hear the nervous breathing of those who walked away, but no one, absolutely no one, reached out. Amanda walked from one side to the other with her cell phone in her ear, saying loudly, "Yes, he's sweating, he's feeling sick. No, it's not blood, it's liquid. I don't know what." Her voice was anxious, but it was not one of concern. It was embarrassing, of someone trying to control a scandal, not save a parent. Jennifer, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, blurted out, "That was disrespectful, honestly. He should have told him he was sick. You don't do that on a night like this." As if I had planned it. As if my body had combined with my soul to humble itself right there in front of the whole family. Tyler, standing near the stairs, looked at me with a mixture of disgust and pity, as if I were a mixture of discomfort and shame, as if that man who held his hand on the first day of school was now just a weight he wanted to forget. I tried to say something, anything, sorry, perhaps, or help me, but the voice did not come out. The throat closed, the mouth dry. I felt like I was going to faint right there, but I held on tight. One hand on the table, the other on the back of the chair. I took a deep breath. Sweat ran down his temples, mixed with fever and pain. Raised, alone, the chaircloth glued to my back. The shirt was now just a cloth soaked in shame. My feet tread on the ground carefully. Wet, they slipped a little, but I managed to balance. I took 2 steps, trembling but firm, and no one came to my side. Amanda was still talking on the phone. Tyler turned his back. Jennifer sighed, as if it were all a bad soap opera. And I, in the center of the room, with my body wounded and my heart in pieces, only wanted one thing, one touch, a gesture, a sign that there was still some love there. But sometimes silence speaks louder than any words, and that room, crowded with relatives, was emptier than my backyard on a snowy day. I was no longer the father who prepared the ham the day before. He wasn't the man who taught Tyler how to drive or who carried Amanda on his lap when she was afraid of thunder. I was just the old man with the swollen belly, the nuisance, the mistake in the family photo. Funny, we spend our whole lives trying to be useful, trying to get it right, trying to deserve the love of the people we love the most. And when you need them most, they disappear. But perhaps the saddest thing is not that. Perhaps the saddest thing is to realize that their absence is no longer surprising. I know that what happened there in that room was strong, but trust me, what comes after will still leave you with a heavy heart. Because even with everything exposed, even with the pain wide open, there was a phrase, a single sentence that Amanda told me softly. And this, I will never forget it. When I took the first step towards the door, I felt all eyes on my back. Those looks weighed more than the belly I carried. Not a word, no attempt to stop me, no outstretched hands, just the creaking of my own shoe on the wooden floor, and that muffled sound of voices trying to reorganize the party. It was as if I had been just a miscalculation, an uncomfortable detail on Christmas Eve that needed to be erased quickly, a blur that someone tries to clean before the visitor arrives. Amanda from the kitchen also blurted out, "Dad, you don't have to leave like this." But the sentence came weak, almost soulless. Too late. I had already opened the door. I could already feel the cold air hitting my face. The December wind from Rochester cut like a knife, but it didn't hurt any more than what I had just left behind. Outside, I looked out the window. They were already putting the glasses back on the table, picking up the napkins, taking out the dirty towel. All as if nothing had happened, as if I had never sat there. As if all that pain was just a domestic accident, a setback. I saw my granddaughter laughing at something her cousin said. I saw Tyler taking another sip of wine. I saw Amanda looking at her cell phone, and I saw myself, there, outside, reflected in the window glass. A man who no longer had a seat at the table. I went down the steps, slowly. The wet wood, the icy handrail. Each step seemed to sink years of memories. the first bike I gave to Amanda, Tyler's diploma I paid for by selling my car, the Christmases when I dressed up as Santa Claus just to make the grandchildren believe. Each memory felt like a brick that I put in that house myself. And now I was being expelled from the building I helped to build. I sat in the car and closed the door. The silence inside was absolute. All I could hear was my heavy breathing, the crackling of my knuckles, and my heart beating slowly, as if trying to convince me not to fall apart. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel. I didn't know if it was cold, pain, or a sadness that had been building up for a long time. I took a deep breath. Once, two, three, and there, alone in the dark, I understood. It wasn't anger that I felt. It was liberation. There are memories that mark us like red-hot iron, and no matter how much time passes, the scar remains. That moment there inside the car, looking at the house where my history was erased before my eyes. I will never forget that moment. Tell me something. Have you ever experienced a situation like this? Any moment that left you marked forever? Tell me in the comments. I want to read. I want to know that I'm not the only one. Write it down if it has touched you in any way, because sometimes remembering together with someone is the only way to move forward. I stayed there for a few more minutes, just staring at nothing, with my hand still on the wheel. And then, without drama, without tears flowing, I said quietly to myself, never again. That was it. A whisper, a decision, but it was as if some door inside me had also closed, not with spite, not with revenge, but with the certainty that dignity is when we choose to stop begging for presence where there is only absence. I shifted into gear, left slowly. The street was silent, covered with snow, and the world seemed to take a deep breath with me. But do you think it ended there? No. Because when I got home alone, still with my shirt stained and my chest tight, I found something I myself had written years before, and that changed everything. Want to know what it was? Wait for me, because what's coming next, it's what gave me the most strength to continue. I got home slowly, with my coat still open, my body tired and my soul in silence. It wasn't that cutting silence like before, the one that screams inside. It was another type, a silence full of air, almost light. I closed the door carefully, hung my hat on the hook, and stood in the hallway for a few seconds, just listening to the ticking of the wall clock. The house was cold, but not as much as the hearts of those people I left behind. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty about being alone. I went to the bedroom, took off my shirt carefully. The fabric was still wet, and the smell carried the memory of that entire night. I left it in the laundry basket, as if I was also leaving there all the weight I had carried for years. I looked at myself in the mirror, the belly still swollen, the skin marked, the sunken eyes. But I was still there, hurt, yes, but standing. I stared at my own reflection like someone facing an old friend and thought, you took one more, and it was not little. From the bedside cabinet, I picked up the diary, the one I started after Mary left. A simple notebook, a worn leather cover with pages that smelled of old ink and nostalgia. I opened it on a blank sheet. The pen trembled a little in my hand, but I wrote anyway. Today, I got rid of it, from the weight on the body and the heaviness in the heart. I closed the diary calmly. It was like sealing a new stage of my life. I can't explain it, but I felt as if something invisible had been ripped from me that night. Something that I should have released a long time ago, but that out of love or fear, I kept carrying. I went to the kitchen. I turned on the yellowish light, put a pan on the stove. Vegetable soup, the one that is left in the freezer and saves us on cold nights. While the soup was heating, I turned on the radio, and that's when it rang. Moon River, that same song that Mary loved, that we danced slowly in the living room when the children were still small and went to bed early. The melody filled the house like an embrace, and I let her in. I sat at the table alone, with the bowl of steaming soup and the teary eyes. But it was a different tear, not pain nor sorrow. It was a relief, because for the first time in many years I gave myself the right to exist without having to explain myself, without having to look healthy or strong or happy. I was just me, swamp, widower, father, man, alive. There are things that only silence teaches us. And in that empty kitchen, I learned one of the most important lessons of my life, that peace doesn't come when others accept you. It comes when you stop begging to be accepted. And if I could say something to those on the other side listening to me right now, it would be this: don't let your pain become a spectacle for those who only appear in the audience to laugh. We deserve respect even when we are weak, maybe especially when it's weak. And if you think that was the strongest night of my life, he still doesn't know what happened the next day, because that's when the phone rang, that I realized that the story wasn't over yet, and that what they told me, it changed everything again. The next morning, the sun appeared shy through the dry branches of the backyard tree. I was on my feet from an early age. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of anguish, but because something inside me seemed awake. As if, after so long anesthetized, I was finally feeling life again. I prepared my coffee, strong, the way I always liked it, and went to sweep the sidewalk. The ground was covered with dry leaves that the night wind scattered. As the broom went back and forth, I felt my body hurt, of course, but it was a pain that I understood, a pain that obeyed me. Different from that other, the one that came from absence, shame, humiliation. This finally seemed to have given a truce. I was there, in the middle of the simple work and the noise of the clothesline swaying, when the phone rang. I let it ring until it fell on the desk. It was not difficult to imagine who it was. Minutes later, he vibrated again. Message. I picked up my cell phone, read slowly. Sorry for yesterday, it all happened very quickly. It was Amanda's. Short, cold, soulless. I took a deep breath. I didn't answer. I put the device in my pocket and went back to sweeping. Almost without ending, another vibration. New message, now from Tyler. We need to talk about his health. Can we stop by later? I read it and stood still, with the handle of the broom resting on my hands. There was the last-minute concern. But I know my son. That was not taken care of. It was fear. Fear of what the others in the family were going to say, of what the neighbors might have seen, of what that night revealed without needing words. I always knew when my children said something out of obligation, and that was what those messages carried, the weight of appearance, guilt disguised as worry. I didn't answer. They didn't even read a viewing receipt. Silence became my shield, my clearest answer. I kept sweeping the sidewalk, each leaf removed, giving me more room to breathe, more lightness on the chest. It was strange to feel that after all, but it was real. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't expecting anything from anyone. And in this not waiting, I found a peace that I didn't even know I was looking for. Nevertheless, there was a part of me that knew. When someone tries to clean up the dirt, only after it has already spread the smell, something is always left. And that same day, an envelope appeared in my mailbox, with Amanda's name in the sender. But what was inside, I could never imagine. The envelope was thick, half crumpled, with Amanda's hurried handwriting on the sender. I picked it up carefully, went back inside the house and sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Mary and I spent hours talking when the silence of the house seemed greater than anything. I tore the edge calmly, as if opening an ancient secret, and from inside slipped a handwritten letter. It began with an apology, well-composed sentences, beautiful words, but empty. You could feel the weight of the obligation there. She said that she didn't know it was so serious, that if she had known, she would have acted differently, that she was taken by surprise. But I knew that deep down, that letter was more about easing her conscience than taking care of mine. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and only thought about one thing. She didn't see me. It wasn't the belly, nor the liquid, nor the disease. It was me, the father. The man who built the house, held the ends, sold the car to pay for college, silenced the pain to see everyone smiling. And the first time I needed a shoulder, I became a reason for looking away. I kept the letter in the drawer of the dresser in the bedroom, along with the other memories that only I carry. And that's when the phone rang again. This time, a distant cousin from Albany. "Paul, I heard about what happened. Do you want to talk?" I thanked him, but said no. I didn't want to explain anything else. I didn't want to console anyone. That night, what came out of my body was not just a liquid. It was fault. It was shame. It was all that they had put on my back for years, dripping before their eyes like a mirror that no one else could ignore. The scene was grotesque, of course, painful, but at the same time, liberating. There was no room for doubt. Now everyone knew. I knew about the disease, the abandonment, the humiliation. And more importantly, I knew it too. I knew that the shame was not mine. That belly that became a joke carried more dignity than all the glasses raised at that supper. It's funny how life turns us inside out just to show who really stood by us. And in my case, no one stayed. But even so, I continue. I walk, I breathe, I exist. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling we help another heart to breathe. Like this video, and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because sometimes what we hide out of shame is precisely what will open someone's eyes. And speaking of eyes, it was the next day that I found a forgotten paper at the bottom of the bag I took for supper. A paper that even I didn't remember putting there. But when I read it, I realized that that piece of paper had something in store that would change everything. The days dragged on, as if time was trying to save me from the rush. In the silence of my house, only the sound of the wall clock was present, along with the crackling of the heater, fighting against the cold outside. I was there, quiet, trying to digest what had happened. Not the dinner itself, nor the physical pain, but the weight of absences, of empathy, of humanity, of sincere presence. Until one day, out of silly curiosity, I ended up entering my Facebook. It wasn't something I did often. Social networks have always seemed to me a place where people smile only with their mouths. But that day, something pulled me. Maybe a little bit of desire to see some good memory. Maybe I miss Mary, who loved to record every moment. That's where I saw it. Amanda had posted the photos of the supper. Several. The fireplace lit, the grandchildren smiling, the dishes well served, the tree lit. The same angles as every year, the same forced smiles. But I wasn't in any. No, neither in the corner nor in the background, as if I hadn't been there, as if I had never existed that Christmas. The caption read, "Gratitude for another year together. Family is everything." I looked at it for a good few minutes without knowing whether to laugh or cry, because it wasn't anger I felt, a mixture of relief and incredulity. They had actually erased me. With your fingertips, one click, a clipping, a digital exclusion that only opened up the emotional exclusion that had been made for a long time. In the comments, an aunt wrote, "Did your father go?" Amanda did not answer. It was left there, blank. Then came private messages from cousins, distant brothers-in-law, neighbors who saw me leaving that night. Everyone was full of, "I heard what happened. I hope you're well. How sad all that." And me? I read everything calmly, with a serene heart. It wasn't sadness that invaded me. It was a fact. They didn't know what to do with the naked truth. They tried to hide it, delete, pretend I wasn't there. But the absence has a weight that no pretty post can disguise. There was an hour looking at that photo of the table with Amanda in the center and Tyler laughing with his children that I wondered, can they really look at this without feeling the hole they left? Because that's what remained, a hole. Not only in the photos, but in the story. A supper that will never be remembered fondly. A Christmas that became a watershed. And yet, I felt more whole than before. Because lying requires maintenance, and I was now free of it. No, there are moments in life when we realize that what really hurts is not abandonment, but the effort that others make to pretend they didn't leave us. And when this effort fails, what is left is just them trying to cover the sun with the sieve. but the light always escapes through the cracks. If you've made it this far, I need to tell you there's still a twist in this story that you may not be expecting. Because even when all seems lost, sometimes that's when life hands over the key. And that's exactly what happened. An envelope, an unexpected call, and a name from the past about to come up again. Do you want to know what was inside that forgotten paper I found? Well then, listen to what comes next. The gift was still there. At the bottom of the drawer of the bedroom closet, among old socks, a pair of gloves that I no longer wear, and a yellowed envelope with Mary's name written in my shaky handwriting. The little box was small, lined with blue velvet, and inside it, a pearl necklace. Just like what Mary wore on old Christmases, when the room was filled with the smell of cinnamon, the grandchildren ran through the halls, and Amanda laughed out loud as she helped her mother set the table. That necklace was more than a memory. It was an attempt to reconnect. Before leaving the house that night of supper, I had put him in the bag with the panettone and a card. In it, I wrote, "You will always be my pride, even when you don't understand me." Those were the words that came out of me that morning, sitting in the armchair with teary eyes. I thought that maybe, with a gesture of affection, she could remember the father who raised her. Of the man who was always there, even without knowing if he was getting it right. But the truth is that that gift never left the bag. When I arrived at her house and saw the first look of judgment, I felt that it was not the time. As the hours passed, the laughter that cut me off, the silence that surrounded me, and the contempt that pushed me out, I understood that that necklace didn't need to go to Amanda. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, but for wisdom. We learn, over time, that refused love should not be forced, and wasted affection doesn't have to become hurt. It can become seed. I spent days looking at that little box. One day I almost took it to the post office to send it. In another, I thought about throwing it away. But it was on a cold morning when I saw a woman sitting in the pew in front of the church, hugging a child with her patched coat, that I understood. I understood that the love we keep, when it does not find an echo in ours, can and should be redirected. That woman might not be my daughter, but she was someone's daughter. And maybe I needed to feel that there was still beauty in the world. So I went to an institution nearby which welcomes homeless women. I took the necklace. I handed it to the coordinator with the card with it. I only asked that it be given to someone who was trying to start over. And I left there light, as if a cycle had been closed, because in that silent surrender I said my last goodbye, speechless, no drama, only with the certainty that sometimes the gesture that we keep for those who do not know how to receive can flourish in the hands of those who really need it. There is a phrase that came to me at that moment, and maybe you need to hear it. Misdirected love turns into pain. Love, well redirected, becomes healing. And that's what I did. I healed a part of me right there, at that door. And you know, when we make peace with what we feel, everything becomes clearer, including what lies ahead. And what I found soon after, at the bottom of a forgotten envelope, was not just paper. It was the answer I didn't even know I was still looking for. Can you imagine what it was? Because what was written there, everything changed. The diagnosis came on a cloudy Wednesday. The doctor spoke with that serious tone, trying to disguise the predictability of the news. A sheets, aggravated by a drug cirrhosis. I listened to everything calmly. I didn't revolt, I didn't cry, I didn't ask why, I just nodded. Because deep down, I already knew. Not because of the exams, but because of the body. Our body speaks, and mine had been screaming for a long time. The big, heavy, sore belly. It was just the reflection of everything I had swallowed without chewing. Crossed words, silent sorrows, repeated contempt. You know when you carry so much inside that it seems like your heart has clogged? That's that. My body has become a deposit of silences. The consultations continued weekly. Doctors, exams, restricted diet, 1,000 guidelines. Sometimes the pain tightened so much that I could hardly sleep. But incredible as it may seem, something in me was light. The soul. Ah, that one didn't hurt anymore. Because there, sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by people who also carried their own burdens, I realized that I was not alone, not in the way I thought. Everyone has a pain that doesn't appear in the photo of the supper, and that's when I had an idea. I took my notebook, the same one where I usually scribble loose thoughts, and wrote a letter. Not for Amanda, not even for Tyler. I wrote to someone I didn't even know. "Dear white-haired friend," I began. It was a letter of affection, one of those that we write as someone who offers shelter. I talked about the pain that you don't see, about how time teaches you to be strong without losing tenderness, about how silence sometimes hurts more than harsh words. And I ended with, "Even if no one says it, you matter, you have value, and I'm rooting for you." I took this letter to a nursing home nearby, the Sunny Haven. I gave it to the coordinator, asked her to give it to someone who was in need of a good word. I returned home, heated my tea, and watched the snow fall through the window. Something changed that day. Something in me. I started writing other letters, more sincere, more intimate. Not as a writer, but as an old man who decided to plant what he never harvested at home. And each sealed envelope was a new brick on the bridge I decided to build. Not backwards, trying to fix what happened, but forward, connecting with those who can still receive. The truth is that I no longer wanted to be recognized as a father or grandfather. I wanted to be remembered as someone who didn't let his pain turn to poison. And look, is there anything more beautiful than transforming pain into care? Because the love that we don't receive, it doesn't have to turn to stone. It can become a road. And when I realized this, my heart breathed like it hadn't done in a long time. The physical pain persisted, yes, but she no longer dominated me. It was there as a memory, not as a prison. Now, every week I write. Simple letters, but full of truth. And sometimes I get tickets back, some with thanks, others with life stories that bring tears to my eyes. And then, alone in the armchair in the living room, I smile. Because I finally understood, it's not blood that makes us a family. It's the affection that we give, even when it doesn't come back. If you've come this far listening to me, know one thing. What kept me standing was not the forgiveness of others. It was forgiveness that I decided to give myself, for having waited so long, for having believed too much, but mainly because I haven't given up feeling. Because when we stop feeling, we stop living. And you know, there is still one last part of this story, a detail that only came after all this, something that made me close this cycle in a way that even I didn't expect, something that started with an old envelope forgotten at the bottom of a memory box. Can you imagine what was inside? Because what I found changed the meaning of everything. Today, looking out the kitchen window as the tea heats up and the soup bubbles on the stove, I finish writing my diary with a sentence that visited me in a deep silence. The belly is still growing, but the shame is no longer mine, because those who carry contempt in their eyes, he's already full of something he does not know how to name. That year's supper was never rebuilt. No other table was set. No invitations came in the mail or by phone. Amanda and Tyler went on with their lives, well-dressed, well-photographed, well-accompanied by absences they don't admit out loud. I follow here, entire, with my belly that still hurts me sometimes, but that no longer carries the weight of the silence of others. My soul, this one, was emptied of what was not mine. And it became lighter because, you see, we spend so much time trying to be accepted at tables where we have never had a real chair that we forget there is peace in eating alone as long as we are at peace with ourselves. What did I learn from all this? That love, when it is conditioned, is just control in disguise. That time does not heal everything, but reveals everything. And what dignity! It is the last thing we should negotiate. No one is obliged to love us. It is true. But we have a duty to love ourselves enough to know when to get up from the table, even if the plate is full, even if the music still plays, even if it hurts. Because there is a freedom that only comes when we understand that we no longer need to ask to fit into anyone's life. I want to thank you for staying here, listening to every line of this memory that still pulsates. What we are doing now, this sharing, it is a balm, a way of remembering that no one is as alone as they think. If this story touched you, leave a like, because it's like a hug, silent but heartfelt. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, subscribe here to the channel. There is always one more story waiting to be told. Tell me also in the comments of which city you are listening to me. I love imagining these stories walking through so many different streets, homes, and hearts. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. And if you think this story was strong, just wait until you hear the next one. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.